What's your thoughts about where we are as a profession? Do you think it's something that is really kind of being phased out, or is it sales more important than ever?
You know, it's so interesting because the world that I was in, with the Xerox world, I see that same world in many other industries, and that world is very much people talking to people. See the complete other extreme of the way the world is LinkedIn, because LinkedIn, in my mind, is living in the complete other side of the spectrum, where it's like
Tell me.
this is the new technology,
Yeah,
and this
yeah,
is how we're using this technology to do all this amazing stuff.
yeah.
And you need to use this lead gen platform, and you need to use Gong and all this kind of stuff out there. And I look at this, and I see this as still being the emerging, like these are still way out there trends.
Really early,
And,
right?
yeah, and it seems to me like there's a lot of businesses out there a lot of companies are trying to innovate in sales, and those companies, these startups that are innovating, they're innovating, and the new startups that are starting out that have the new funding, that are following the SDR model and the BDR model and all of this, and using all the tools that are brand new out there, those are still in the new phases. So it seems like if we're talking about new companies, new companies are using new technology. If we're talking about companies that have been around, they're using things that have worked for a long time. And for them to jump into some new technology, it's got to be a real solid value proposition for it, and it seems like those are obviously the big whales for these startups to break into, but there's a lot more of those companies than there are these startups. And I think LinkedIn is a water cooler conversation of those startups. And those startups are all getting you charged up about the new stuff, but when you get down to it.
That was Derek Shebby, and I'm your host, Joe Lemon. Now, Derek is an elite sales trainer who really specializes in the commodity sale, something that is one of the most challenging things to do, right? When your products and your services look just like everybody else's, how do you separate yourself? Is because he really breaks down the sale. Like, a lot of people rush through the process, and we get into trying to sell on culture, or we get into trying to sell on, just how cool and just some of the crazy features that whatever service or product that we have really brings to the table. But Derek really breaks down, how do you add value to your customers from their perspective, right? And it really is a science process. It's a scientific step process that everyone should be doing to deconstruct those conversations. So if you're looking for how to understand how to get into those conversations, Derek has a whole training library. Go check out his website. He's the president of Modern Sales Training. You can find him anywhere online. He's one of the top guys on like Udemy. And with that said, let's dive into today's conversation.
Yeah, there's even on LinkedIn, there's so many people that talk about what to say on the phone and what to do, and I think and I literally just finished listening to your numbers game, and I think what you're doing is you got the right things down. I think a big thing that I've seen just over the years in general are people don't learn in levels, and I don't know how large your sales team is over there, but I think when you first start making phone calls, you've got to know what you're going to say, and you've got to feel really comfortable with it. And the messaging on LinkedIn is a lot more, I would say, more advanced.
Yes.
I mean, some people, these SDRs or different level people that are calling in, they might not feel confident talking to a C-level. And if they're saying, hey, do you have a few minutes to hear what I'm, or a few seconds to hear what I'm calling, and if you find it valuable, we can keep talking. I mean, that's almost saying, hey, let's have a conversation. Are you okay to have a conversation with me? And these people could be terrified as it is just being on the phone.
Yes.
And if they're that terrified, I mean, and you're saying you should call these C-levels and ask them if they feel comfortable talking to you for a few minutes on the phone. And I don't know, you're brand new. That's scary.
Dude, this is funny that we just kind of dove right into it. So let's kind of keep it going, because I want to hear your whole background and everything too, man, about how you got into sales. But you're absolutely right. That's how I started. I started off, and you look at this LinkedIn content, And I'm like, damn, there's some smart guys out there. Like you're like, like some of these guys really, really are on it, and they understand a lot of the nuances at the executive level, whenever it comes to like trying to sell. But when you're just a guppy, right? Whenever you're a person just doesn't know where to start, fresh out of college, like you're like, hey, I need to make some money. So people told me people in sales make money. you don't really know where to go, and you just
Right.
bumble your way into it, which is how I think a lot of sales guys get into it. It's not like the scripted path for most of us, at least a lot of guys I know. It's like, hey, I tried this thing, that wasn't cool, this didn't make any money, and should I go back to school or should I just go sell some stuff? Well, let me try selling some stuff, and then let's see if that works. And it's this bounce around, bumble around, fumble your way through your career path. And so it's not a targeted, like, all right, I know where I'm going in life. I know what I'm going to do. And when I first got on the phone, it was just that. I bumbled and stumbled my way through conversations. Right.
Yeah.
And I literally was just like, yeah, I'm Joe. And there's this thing on the phone that I would love to press into. I really want to hear how you kind of got into it too, is that you can tell so much off someone's tone of voice.
Absolutely.
Authenticity, experience level, like if they're comfortable just kind of talking to like different people. And, when I first was getting on this grinding out 100 plus phone calls, I mean, I had none of that stuff. I didn't know my industry. Like I didn't feel comfortable talking. So all that, man. You got to tell me though, Derek, how'd you get started, man?
And graduated from college, and I got working at Xerox Corporation. I started working there in sales, and I stayed there for my whole career, and I was there 17 years.
Wow.
And I was year over year #1 rep for the company, and ended up going into sales management. And of course, I begrudgingly, because you're doing so well as a sales rep, you're like, why do I want to do that?
Yeah.
And then eventually I did. And my senior VP said, well, before they wanted me to be a sales manager, they said that they want me to be a trainer to learn how to coach people. And so I thought that was strange, because they just put people that would quit into a sales manager role to keep them. I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. But then here I am, the top in sales, and they're moving me into a trainer role. And so basically I trained people there for a year, and then they moved me into sales management, and I was a top sales manager for them too for years. And basically, I was crossing off all of my achievement lists, and helping people win the commodity sale and selling value and all that kind of stuff. Because we're in an industry where there's 20 plus competitors all selling copy machines, if you can think of it, right? And through that time, I helped grow the company, our division of the company considerably. And I got married, and I wanted kids at that point. That was my next achievement that I wanted to have. And my wife's the oldest of 8. And so she wasn't in a rush, Joe. She was just thinking, hey, yeah, I'm good. And
really?
Said, well,
Really? Okay.
Yeah. And I'm like, well, I'd kind of like to have kids. And, sometimes she said, okay, well, if you want to have kids, let's go travel first. And so, like any sales manager, and I'd be like, sure, let's just make it like an extra day on a 3-day weekend.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And she's like, yeah, that's not going to work, because we're going to go to Italy.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, okay, well, that's probably not going to happen, because it's, she's like, okay, well, I can wait. I don't need to have kids soon. So I said, well, that's tough. So basically I figured out a way to make it work. Like any salesperson, you find a way. And I worked it out with my local president to still be a producer, because that's what he didn't want to lose, my productivity. And so I still was a producer, but I'd be responsible for the new people, the tenured reps, the major account reps, and the sales managers, the development for all of them, and producing. So I think that's a little different than most sales trainers out there.
Yeah, it is.
You go into that role, and it's like you're stuck in the classroom. That's it. But for me, it was almost just like, no, these people aren't performing. I want you to go with them, hold their hand, close the deals, find out where they have problems, and fix it. Same thing with the managers. He's like, this manager has 4 of their 10 reps that are underperforming. sit down with the manager, figure out what they're doing wrong, hold their hand in the field, fix it, show them how to fix it, and then I'll deploy you to somewhere else.
Mm.
And so basically I did that for years, and was
So
able to travel for weeks at a time, things like that too.
I have a lot of questions around that. So,
Yeah.
so were you bouncing around the U.S. like training people, or were you virtually doing the training? Like, how was that set up back then?
No, so I mean, really, it went all the way up until January of this year is when
Oh
I
wow.
decided to leave. But I stayed in the West Coast, and I would be deployed at our locations that we had all the way up the West Coast, and it would be strategically done. Like my peers were the VPs of sales in the company, and most of them were people that I had trained too, by the way.
Nice.
So I developed them from their first deal all the way up through their sales management and then their VP of sales. So we were at a peer level, and they would be like, "Hey, Derek, I really need help over here." And so then I'd be like, "Okay, well let's figure it out." And then I'd fly up and I would be part of the. It'd be kind of like Mr. Wolf from Pulp Fiction, if you remember that. They'd send Mr. Wolf in when there was a problem they didn't know how to solve, and so I would be deployed like that.
You're the cleaner.
And so, yeah, I was the cleaner, but I'd be in there and I'd fix it. I'd basically help fix the person, fix the team, fix the process. And so basically I did that for years. And in 2017, I said, you know what, I've got this down of how to develop people in sales, basically teach them how to sell.
Yeah.
I said, and I was like, maybe I could find a way to do this for companies around the world. And so I made these general courses. I made general sales courses just to help more people. And I ended up coming up with 12 skills that I felt salespeople needed to learn, and that I'd constantly would do over and over again with the managers and the reps. So then you would think, okay, well, you already have to produce business and you got to make it happen. And how do you still find a way to teach them how to handle objections? So then you probably would create something on PowerPoint, or you create a deck and you figure out a training and you do it.
Yep.
And you do it, and it would take you time to create that just to get these certain results. And you think about how to do that and you do it. And so imagine that as my role for 17 years, in total. And so basically I found those segments of skills that were important, and I had chiseled them, improved them over the years until I said, you know what, I could probably make this general and put it out there. And so just for fun, to help more people out there in the world. And so I did that, and I put it on Udemy. Yeah. So basically I created these 12 different courses, but that were just the skills that you teach, like how to prospect over the phone, how to prospect in person, how to handle objections in person, over the phone, and, the price objection. And I basically created 12 different skills that were different trainings, and I put them on Udemy. And there's thousands of people teaching sales on Udemy, but within a few months, I was the best seller on Udemy. And Udemy's own Salesforce uses my stuff to train their own people to go out and sell, to big companies. And basically over the years, and this was just like a side hustle for me, because I was still doing my thing at Xerox. But I wanted to help people. It's like you eventually get to the point where you want to really help develop other people. And so I generalized it, put it out there, and I've got over 15,000 students now around the world through it.
Wow.
And and I've got countless organizations that are using my program from Udemy to level up their sales force. And I get reached, like I had people from major companies reach out to me and say, like, your course is like turned me into a top sales performer, Derek, this and that. And they're reaching out to me, and or the C-level saying, your stuff has been transformed our whole sales force. We use your stuff for our own, our own company way, our learning paths. And so basically in January, I decided to go full time, and I called it Modern Sales Training, by the way. Wow. And I rebranded all of these 12 programs, and I called it Sales in 21 Days. And I put it on my own teachable plan. And as of yesterday, Udemy finally released all my courses, because they were holding on to them, like not wanting to let them go.
How does that work? Yeah. So you mean, like, did you have to give them rights to kind of keep control of it, or is it still
Udemy Udemy has different sort of platforms, and their Udemy for Business platform, they sell to companies around the world.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where a lot of these big companies have taken my courses and have had been able to, but I had to request 6 months ago to take them off.
Wow.
Because Udemy doesn't pay the instructor much. And so I wanted to put it under my own platform so I can make a living off of it. And so, yeah, so as of yesterday, they're finally off, which is good for me. But, you know, I feel bad for all the people around the world that are using it to do great. But hopefully now it'll be another way for them to go, let me come to Derek and see what we can do. And so basically, long story short, you know, I went full time with modern sales training in January. Mm-hmm. And I have consulting clients that started with my programs, and now they have me helping their entire organizations and, you know, level up. And I've got, like, for example, I've got a client that has 1,000 sales reps. Wow. That's international that I'm working with them and helping their level up their VPs of sales and their whole sales organization. And then I've got companies that are different sizes that I consult for, and I do workshops, and I also have my courses that I sell on my own platform on my Modern Sales Training Academy. So, yeah,
it's been crazy.
To speak about what you're saying about online is just real quick about this whole podcast journey. And I think I found you early on, Joe, because you had so many podcasts, and I was like, this guy. I looked at your page and I was like, this guy's got it down, man. This guy's great. I love the energy, the positivity.
Appreciate
and I was like, I could learn from this guy. And so I think that's why I followed you, and you eventually said that we should just connect.
Yeah, man.
Which I'm glad we did. But I got 2 podcasts. The first one is called In Between Sales Calls, and Close.io just ranked me number 15 out of 41 of the best podcast this year, which is cool.
Big congratulations, brother.
Thanks. I thought that was pretty neat. But that podcast is just me giving sales tips in under 10 minutes. Kind of like your one you just did about the numbers game, mm-hmm. which was like a quick 10-minute pitch. Mine's not as cool. I don't have the background music like you, but yeah, there's that. And it hasn't been growing as fast as I like, because I haven't been bringing on these gurus that literally just live in their room and never get out in the field and haven't been selling for forever. Mm-hmm. And so I don't really look up to them, you know, but I probably have the same mentality as other salespeople looking up to them going like, come on. But so I haven't wanted to bring them on to boost my ratings. But I thought if there was another podcast that I'd create to bring someone else on, mm-hmm. it would be a podcast to talk about deals. And so I came out with my second sales podcast, which came out in August, called The Deal Breakdown. And in that, I literally just bring on a B2B salesperson, and we talk about a deal that they won and a deal that they learned from. Because it doesn't matter how good you get, Joe. It's if someone says they broke into a deal and they're at your company, or they won a deal, and you weren't involved, you go, oh, tell me about it. It's just interesting. You're like, how'd you break in? And, you know, what happened along the way? Was there competition? You know, how much profit did you put in it? Obviously, sometimes that we won't talk about that in the podcast, but I make it simple where we don't talk about the company itself that you sold to. Mm-hmm. We don't talk, no names of the contacts, no names of the companies, but just, you know, what did the deal size represent in terms of budget? Like, I know you're trying to get 20K deals right now, but maybe this was a mm-hmm. 400K deal, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe that one deal was that 400K deal. And it's like, okay, well, mm-hmm. you looking at the last 21 days of the month, like you were saying, how is it going to happen? Well, that's literally what we talk about. We'd say, well, I didn't know how I was going to do it, and this one ended up being 400,000 of my revenue. I keep bringing that up because that's what you just said in your podcast, but this is a major order, or it doesn't really matter the size of it, but how did you first identify it? How'd you break in? What'd you say to do that? What was the opportunity you found in the first appointment? How'd you build value against the competition? How did you eventually close this deal in the proposal? How long did it take? And what'd you learn? And so I have 25 of those episodes done now. And I think that's super cool because
I do too, bro. Yeah.
Because you know what? No one talks about I used this person's methodology. You know, no one's stop and go, I was talking to this customer and I thought, well, I got to follow this specific steps, the steps that I learned from this person, insert this guru or that guru or this book. No, it's just a salesperson that's in it that just has to find a way to win. And how do they do that? And so we talk about that each episode, and these people don't have a big following. So I don't get a jolt from a boost of people listening in. It's just real deals, and that's it. And yeah, it's been super cool. And hopefully, that will circle through their organization so I can get more exposure there and then try to sell my services inside those companies. But at the very least, I want to help, and it's a very practical way of helping people. So anyway,
dude, can we just stay on that topic for a second?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
I really think that when it comes to and this is coming from a guy that doesn't have a crazy following, but I've leveraged my podcast to help me gain business. And it's not because I was ranked on the charts or any of that, but the relationships that you develop with your guests, for one, is crazy, because there's a much more intimate flow, right? And especially whenever you get into this place where, man, when you're just talking about stuff that both of you guys can really jam on, like just common bridge stuff, right? You guys are both deal makers. So you have another deal maker on the line. You're out there doing deals, and then you guys can just kind of have that back and forth banter. It's crazy how it fast tracks those relationships. It's bananas. It blows me away each time about how people I've never met in person, but I just kind of did this, and you're like, damn, well, yeah, let's go do something together, right? It's like automatic. And so breaking down a deal and talking to people that are in the field is something that people, I think, in media disrespect. People are so caught up in the numbers and being on lists, because like I just heard I listened to this one podcast, because I'm like a podcast guy. I listen to podcasts as much as my wife will let me. And it is one of those things where we're literally, this is like all these lists coming out. Like Spotify had their list, Forbes had their list, Inc had their list, all dropped like within the past week or so. And it's like everyone's chasing the list. But if you look at where media is going, it's going more towards the individuals. It's going more towards how niche can you get this? How drilled down can you get it? Because, like, you can only go but so wide, and it's so cost so much to go wide. But you can go narrow, you can go deep pretty inexpensively. So that's where that's where your biggest bang for your buck is, or your time is, right?
Yeah, well, that's good. I think it follows my own philosophy in general. And that's, I've been a student of sales just like you, Joe, over the years. And for me, sure, I've got the books, but at the end of the day, you read the book and you go, let me try it.
Yep.
Because it makes no sense just to have entertainment. You got to apply it. And so I would read these people's books, so it doesn't matter who it is. And I try it and I go, well, that worked. And I think that could work for me in my industry, or that worked this time. It might not work next time, but I think I'll put it in my tool bag. Mm-hmm. But a lot of times you go, that doesn't work. This person clearly is showing they don't know what they're talking about here. Yeah. This person hasn't been out there selling in for a long time, and this was not relate. And so I think what happens is there's so much, especially on LinkedIn, talk about the book and how you do it in the book. And I see these things. It drives me crazy, Joe.
Yeah. Talk about it, bro.
It drives me crazy, because I'm like, I would never want you to be a salesperson for me, or I'd never want you to be a sales manager for me. Mm-hmm. Things like that. And I'm like, this person has no clue.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I obviously be a little fired up of that, but
yeah, man.
But I thought, you know what? Let's just cut through all the BS and let's just bring people on to just talk about a deal. And that's it. We literally, our introduction with the person, a lot of times that's my first time meeting with them. And we talk about what they do for the first maybe 2 or 3 minutes, and we understand their company and what products they sell for their company, so that just the user can get on the same page, and then how they actually help those companies. And then from there, we talk about literally the deal. And so there's like 30 minutes, 40 minutes, 50 minutes of just talking about how they won a deal and the whole sales cycle. And you think about it for you, I'm sure you talk to your CEO, and the CEO goes, oh, I saw you just landed this, this chiropractor, or this large company. And then they say, tell me about it. And you give them the cliff notes, like, well, this happened, this happened, this happened, this happened. And maybe like after 5 minutes, you're like, well, I think that's probably what I can tell them, because there's even 5 minutes seems like a lot, but I get to talk to people about the whole thing, and the whole deal takes like 30 minutes minimum to go through. Mm-hmm. And then, so it's exciting because you talk about these things that you won, and it's no fluff. It's just, this is what happened. Mm-hmm. And keeping certain things confidential for everyone's, to make it okay. But you come out of it, and a lot of these people that I brought on have shared that deal with other people, saying, this is the full story. This is how I won this deal. I know you can learn something from this deal. Here it is. And so I'm trying to make it really practical, which I think my stuff is practical and relatable, which is why it's been so popular on these platforms, because people know that I'm talking from someone who does it. And
I have a lot of questions here. I mean,
yeah.
I want to be really respectful of your time. So let me know if we got to cut off. I can be a
We're
little
good.
long-winded because I can talk.
We're good. We're good.
All right, cool. So as far as foundations for
Yeah.
sales, do you feel like lots of the reps that you meet out in the field, they have the foundations down, or do you feel like that's one of the biggest things lacking? Because in my mind, I got a lot of thoughts, but I would love to hear what you got to say.
Yeah. You know, actually I talk about this a lot, and I would say it's even, when I say foundations, that's more just like general best practice tips to think about long-term, which, I mean, it still is a 4-hour course. But I would say this is more the challenge that I see out there. When people are onboarding their organization, in my mind, there's 3 things that they need to do. One, there needs to be an aspect of culture, and you're training about the management process, the company you're with, the rep should be fired up to work for your company, and all the future and all the hope that they could get and grow within that company. And when the meetings are, and the structure, like the structured week, like what's the fabric of the company? I just call that culture training. And then there's and by the way, that's also expectations for activity, expectations for performance, things like that. The second thing they need training on is product, and product is whatever it is that you sell. And I would say that means, here is the product, here's what it does, here's how it's better than other products, here's how it compares against competition. And also, along with products, that also includes CRM and the tools that we use to sell, and the, you know, order packages, and the processing paperwork, and who to contact related to the product, everything product related. And then the third aspect of onboarding or salespeople development in general should be how to sell. And what I see is that how to sell area is greatly missing. And what happens is people blur the product section with how to sell, because they think you get someone into your company, you say, let me teach you about the product. And then what happens is, when you teach them about the product, they go, okay, I got it. I know what the product does. And they say, great, so go sell it. And they'll be like, here's a couple scripts and go figure it out from there. And what they're missing is, people aren't really trained on how to sell. And when you know how to sell, then the product training becomes very important, because you plug that into your knowledge of that, right? And that's where it gets blurred. People typically do culture and product, and they do very, very little training on how to sell. And so that's what I'd say there. That makes sense?
No, come on, man. Of course, man. I mean, like, I love that you went there, because I think that you're right. People can get fired up about working with XYZ brand. Like, oh, I'm with this brand, and they put it on LinkedIn. Everyone says, big ups on a brand new gig, right? On a brand new job, brand new position, right? Because you're with this great brand. And I think people get that down. But it doesn't translate, because they struggle how to sell.
Right.
And I think that's where, as sales professionals in our industry, as people that sell, is that's the biggest, it makes so much sense. That the reason why that's the biggest hurdle for everyone is because you get into this place where you are excited about the culture. That's a me thing. I'm excited about my product. That's a me thing. But you haven't done a damn thing for them yet.
Right.
Right. And so we're all selfish. I mean, or it comes across as selfish, right? Instead of about serving and it being about the actual customer, client, industry, whatever you're up to.
Exactly. 100%. That's what I see. And when I work with these top sales professionals, what typically happens is they go into situations, and, the other day I had a one-on-one as part of the, consulting package that I had with a large client, and I was meeting with their top rep, and the top rep says, Derek, I make the most, I'm the top rep of this company, but I don't really make top rep money. And I said, what do you mean? And he says, well, I sell the most, but I don't feel like I'm making money. And I said, well, let's just fast forward to this part of the question. And let's just say I'm one of the customers you're selling to. And I ask you this question. I say, well, how is your product offering different than this other vendor? What would you say? And so the rep immediately goes to talking about all the reasons why he's a value. And he's like, that whole thing, like, oh, I answer the phone when the typical things, I'll give you my cell phone. I'm there on the spot. I know it better than anyone. I sometimes can come out there and help you fix this problem, but whatever. He goes through this whole thing. He sounded great, by the way. And I could tell that, that's probably why he's doing so well. What was missing though is, and I was coaching him on this and a CEO afterwards, that the reason why they're losing to price, or they're fighting on price and trying to win on price, is because he's not giving any reasons why their product is better. And I'm a firm believer, obviously coming from Xerox. I mean, we're the most expensive vendor in a copier industry. I mean, copiers, Joe. I mean, you look at one, you think that, you look at it, this is the same. Well, we were the most expensive vendor, the most expensive. Yeah. Like, it wasn't even a question. And we still had to sell with profit and win that way. And so the question always became, why should we spend more for you? And there's a reason that you've got to tap in on. And I know you mentioned the features before, but if you can't connect the feature to what matters to the customer and how it's going to help improve their business, then the customer is just going to think you're like everybody else. And so this rep was skipping all the reasons why his product and his company was a better option and just going to him being the reason. So by doing that, he was saying that he's just like everyone else. And his company is, and that he's the difference. They should go with them. And because of that, he wasn't able to sell. He wasn't able to win in margin. He was just winning off of himself. And typically when that happens, customers say, okay, listen, I like you. That's why I'm going to go with you, but I'm with this other vendor right now. So can you save me a little bit of money off of that? And then I'll make the switch. And that's what happens when people don't see a solution as being better. They just go in at a lower price. And so the big thing I've been working with that company is, how can their people start fighting for differentiation and leaning on that and leading with that and doing it in a way that it resonates with the customer. And when that happens and they go through all that and build all that value there, sure, they can add in the whole, me, and this is why I help, like that as icing on the cake. But if there's no cake and it's just icing, they're going to be in a price war. And so that's the world that we're in.
Dude, I love that you went there, man, because there's almost a direct competitor too, for everyone. Like, very few people have a product that is so specialized that there's nothing else like it on the market. The fact that a lot of people get beat up on price, and that you pointed it back to, it's because they're focusing on them still, is really interesting. I hadn't really heard that one before. I like it though.
Yeah. I think because I was forced for the last 17 years to sell the most expensive product in an industry that's a commodity industry, copiers, that you literally had to learn how to live in the world of fighting for differentiation, fighting for profit. And I think that's the world that when you know how to do that right, and that's really what my main focus is, teaching people how to win that differentiate themselves, win with more profit, more value. That's why that's really what I've been living in. And so to be the best product at a lower price just doesn't make any sense to me. I believe that if you have the best product and you believe that, and you should, your company should sell that to you in your culture stage.
Yeah.
But if you believe that, then you should be selling it higher. You should be making people see why they should spend more for you, and realize that they would do it in a heartbeat. And that comes from knowing how to sell. And yeah, that's what I find missing out there, because there was no teaching of, this is how you sell. It was just more like, here's our product. And then if you don't know how to differentiate the product, then it just becomes, I'm the differentiation, not the company I'm working for. And people don't know that. And it just ends up being you end up being in the price war.
Oh, it's funny how some things are just tried and true, no matter what the age is, no matter where we're going with all the tech that comes in, or the different structures around SDRs, BDRs, whatever the extra titles that we have. Some things will just kind of stay with you regardless. And if you can lock in and figure out how to make that happen consistently, not the big shot, right? Like it's always funny to me when I talk to certain people, like, oh man, if we get this one deal, I'm like, dude, this is a day in, day out hammering away process. At least how I think about it a lot of times. And then if you get the well, great. Of course we got the well, awesome. But we're always fishing. And I'm curious though, because a lot of people talk bad about sales. A lot of people get into it and they say sales is dying. We got so much stuff that we can do with AI. Marketing's getting more targeted. We can just have forms. They can fill out the form and just buy whatever they want to get. And get the whole sales guy out the way. At least that was the conversation I was hearing at the beginning of the year. I'm not sure if that's still so much present during COVID times, because anyway, I got some thoughts there. But what's your thoughts about where we are as a profession? Do you think it's something that is really kind of being phased out, or is it sales more important than ever?
It's so interesting because the world that I was in, with the Xerox world, I see that same world in many other industries. And that world is very much people talking to people and selling and about having that connection and finding ways to solve problems and that sort of thing. So it's that world that you're in too, is the world that I've been in forever. And I still see that with clients today. And I think what makes me see the complete other extreme of the way the world is LinkedIn. Yeah. Because LinkedIn, in my mind, is living in the complete other side of the spectrum, where it's like, this is the new technology. Yeah, and this is how we're using this technology to do all this amazing stuff. Yeah. And you need to use this lead gen platform, and you need to use, Gong and all this kind of stuff out there. And I look at this and I see this as still being emerging, like these are still way out there trends.
Really early, right?
Yeah. And it seems to me like there's a lot of businesses out there a lot of companies are trying to innovate in sales. And those companies, these startups that are innovating, they're innovating. And the new startups that are starting out, that have the new funding, that are following the SDR model and the BDR model and all of this and using all the tools that are brand new out there, those are still in the new phases. So it seems like if we're talking about new companies, new companies are using new technology. If we're talking about companies that have been around, they're using things that work, that have worked for a long time. And for them to jump into some new technology, it's got to be a real solid value proposition for it, and it seems like those are obviously the big whales for these startups to break into, but there's a lot more of those companies than there are these startups. And I think LinkedIn is a water cooler conversation of those startups. And those startups are all getting you charged up about the new stuff. But when you get down to it, I mean, if you're selling to chiropractors, Joe, and that's who you're going, I mean, they're not on LinkedIn, and they're not on LinkedIn going, you know what? I can't survive without seamless.ai. Like they're not even thinking that,
dude.
They're
lots of these guys just got websites this year because it was mandatory.
Yeah. And that's what I'm saying. So it's like when we talk about sales, and even these conversations that these gurus have about sales, and like, oh, this is trending. Well, a lot of these people that we're talking to are these people that are hired on by these startups that just came out. And these startups are trying to get you to sell the new cool tool. I mean, I just found out Gong has only been around for 4 years. It sounds super cool. But you'd think like it was the biggest thing in the entire world because it's all people talk about on LinkedIn. And of course we're talking about right now, but the point is, Joe, is I think there's the world of sales that is the real world. Yeah. And there's this fantasy world, water cooler conversation on LinkedIn of all these things people should be doing and all these things people are saying. And that's really what it is. It's not prevalent out there. And people that are actually selling, Joe, that are actually out there doing it,
Mm-hmm.
they're not going on LinkedIn.
It's true.
They're just not. It's like,
true.
I have to pull these. Deal breakdown people is a perfect example.
Yeah.
I have to like pull these people out of their day-to-day lives to try to get them to share a deal. And they're so excited about it. They always say, Joe, I've never been, they say, Derek, I've never been on a podcast before. I'm really nervous. And I'm like, well, I wouldn't imagine because, I mean, that you'd ever been on one because you're out there selling right now.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You're not out there just talking about stuff like people do all day long on LinkedIn. And it's, and I think that's the conversation we need to make sure we're staying in. Are we being practical? Sales is still happening everywhere.
Yes.
And the ones that are in the extreme that are all trying to get people to talk about their stuff, those emerging trends. Yeah. Unfortunately, that's all we hear about on LinkedIn. And those are the only people talking about it. It's like, they're all talking about it with each other. And you and I, who are on there to try to get more exposure, we're like getting wrapped up in it. Then we go back to the companies we work with, and nobody talks about that stuff. No one's doing that, and it's just a different world. And so, that's what I would say. So the sales is the same thing, but if you go into this conversation of LinkedIn, you find that the startups and the millions of dollars of the companies that are spitting these people up, part of the strategy is getting people to talk about what they sell and make people think that that's the world. And that's not the world. That's like the small part of the world that are the emerging sales trends that are, trying to make it out there. Does that answer your question?
No, yeah, man. I mean, like, what's so cool about this conversation to me is that it goes back to where we kind of opened up with around media. And, LinkedIn is truly like just like another medium platform, right? It's like another channel like Facebook, Instagram. I mean, they have different applications, but for the most part, you're going there getting some insights, some information, but it's still very targeted, right? And it's still not this, it's this that we're getting, right? And sure, yeah, there's some things that definitely apply. And if you go to Instagram, depending on who you follow, you think that the world's falling apart, or it could be the greatest thing in the world, right? Depending on what you choose to lock in on. And unfortunately, there's a lot of people talking that are trying to sell books and courses that they don't know anything about, right? Because anybody can do it now, right? If right. I mean, about things that they don't know about. And it's okay to get on the microphone like I do and ramble and talk about things, but the transparency is difficult because you don't know the reality versus the truth, right? And you know what I mean? Like what they're giving you as the reality versus the actual truth. And what we get fed a lot of times is not what's really happening behind the scenes, because you're like you're saying, the people in the field, they don't have time to post daily. Because they're in the field, and then they go home and they have kids and they have other stuff going on in life. They have real world things, and it's like, so the biggest, like normally the guys with the biggest horn have the most time, and that kind of speaks to something in itself, right?
It totally does. And I think it's difficult because, when you and I have to have this presence there of some sort, you're on there and you're like, you just see everyone talking.
Yeah.
And you just got to think, and is this the best use of my time? Is this what clients are actually doing? I mean, I have a client literally that told me that they don't have, like, their salespeople don't even use Outlook to put their calendar to use their calendar as an example.
Yeah.
And
are they making sales?
They're making sales, but I'm not saying that they're not using something. They're not using something else. I'm saying they're using nothing to manage their calendar. Not even like a piece of paper to write down, this is what I have this week.
Yeah.
And so if you think about that, Joe,
mm-hmm.
and you say, okay, they're not using any fancy brand new app, they're just not even using anything.
Yeah.
And that comes down to basic discipline. And this is a large company. And so, I think we can get caught up in the trends, but when you sit down and you talk to one of your clients that you're trying to sell to,
mm-hmm.
they're not talking about things that are crazy. They're talking about things that are very practical, and they have real normal situations. And you're not going to go in there saying, you know what, this will be solved by this brand new thing that just spun up out of a startup last week. It's probably solved by your product that you have. You just need to find a way to connect it in a way and tie that value back to them so they can see why they need to create urgency and get it now. And that's how to sell.
And, one of the reasons I like working with smaller companies, because it is that, like a lot of guys I'm working with are, solo. I mean, they're small business, like less than 5 people at these private practices. Sometimes you get, I have a couple Kaisers, I have some teams that we work with, and that's all the, all my will stuff, right? But the day-to-day conversations are with these guys that are like, look, it's 2020. This is a challenging year for most people doing something, and they need to see their bottom line today. Like they're looking at it like, hey, we have bills going on today. Like the trends, awesome. Let's talk about them in 3 to 5 years, right? Because right now, like I want to see something happening tomorrow in my business. I want to see this happen in a real way, right? Whatever you're trying to push or even trying to get out there. And that's one of the reasons I love kind of simplifying it. And I know some of the best sales guys. So this one guy, I can't call his name right now. He's over in like Germany, but he's in like Southern Germany, which is a lot more conservative for, of like part of Germany. Right. And so he kills it for our actual company. And literally he does close to about $2 billion himself, and he has a team under him as well. But our average product is like 20 grand. So he's moving some units, right? As like a one person show. Right. And like you said, no technology. The guy rolls around like in discipline though, like with his like black book, and he keeps notes like it's his religion, and it works. He makes a good living for him and his family. They do easily over a good $300,000 to $400,000 by himself, taking home, right? So it's not a shabby salary, but he's not on LinkedIn. You won't find him. You have to have his cell phone number. You can have his house number easily. And that's how he rocks. And that's how he's been doing it for 10 plus years. And I'm not saying to say that you have become a caveman, but I do believe in what you're saying is the fact that you get back to the basics and you do the work that is going to produce results.
Yeah.
Right. And so anyway, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I'm right there with you. And it's just, you got to be practical, and I'm really glad I was able to get on here and talk with you today about this kind of stuff. I'm really passionate about practical, applicable information, and there's way too much stuff out there making you think that you need to have like just one last thing about the
please
when people call, all this stuff I see on there about how you introduce a cold call just drives me crazy, where you say something like, hi, I'm Derek with Modern Sales Training, and you weren't expecting my call, and I don't know, is it okay if I just share with you a little bit about why I'm calling, take maybe 15 seconds, and then you can let me know if we can continue the conversation? And I hear that all over the place. And I'm listening to this going like, you have a new sales rep starting at your company.
Yeah.
You going to tell them to say that? Because then what happens is the person's going to be like, what is this about? And they're like, oh, just, and then it's over. It's over. And they're like,
yeah, I'm out of here. Yeah, I'm out of here.
Yeah. And then they're going to be like, I'm freaked out. This is like, I'm never going to get here. I'm never going to get where I need to be. I'm not good in sales. I'm not cut out for this. I told them I wasn't going to be good at this.
I knew it.
And then, I can't do it. And then they're going to quit. Or you can start off by saying, here's a general script that you can follow, and you practice it, and you role play, and they practice saying the script. Customer's going to say yes. Customer's going to say no. Customer's giving objections. Customer's going to hang up mid-script, whatever. They're getting comfortable with the level, right? Level 1. Mm-hmm. And then they probably don't even know what they sell at that point, because you got them on the phones, and they're still learning what they sell. They're still learning about what their meeting is. They're trying to schedule.
Yeah.
What they're trying to get to. And then after they learn that a little bit and they know what that next step is, and they feel more confident about what they're closing for, and this takes time, and they close some deals and they get battle tested. Now we go back to that appointment script, and they've learned, they understand more. They're more confident. Now you can say, okay, hey, you want to have a even better chance on the phone? Well, you do that by actually having a conversation with someone on that first call. And this is a good way of introducing that, a good way of getting that conversation. But you can't have that conversation if you don't know these sort of things, if you don't feel this sort of stuff. And it feels to me like it's another one of those people aren't training in the right levels and teaching people what they need at that moment, you know? And like for you, if someone called you up right now, Joe, and said, hey, I know you got to get 400,000 this month and you only have, 18 business days left. I've got some ideas on ways that other people that are selling into the, into the small business, chiropractors that are really killing it in December. Would you be open to a 15-minute call to hear about what some of these other companies are doing?
Let's talk. Yeah.
Yeah. That's obviously, it's going to take anyone time to get to that level, but that's being hyper focused and tailored to the person you're calling. And you got to train in levels, because that's not something you can immediately get someone to.
I love that. Yeah. And as we get to wrap up too, because I think what you're speaking to is really important, because the level of insight that you have as a guy fresh out of college versus, where I was 5 years ago and now to where I am today, I can always learn. I'm literally one of those guys that I'm not, I'm give me back to the basics always type of guy, like, hey, when I start getting too high up there, I'm like, all right, let's get back down and let's get back to just taking the first step. How do we open up tones, pitches, all that good stuff. I want all of it. Right. But you can only handle but so much in the beginning, and you can only start with so much out the gate. And I think that getting people warmed up to it and getting people used to a certain amount of discipline behind it is a process. And I think throwing someone in the deep end, of course, you're going to have a couple guys that can swim, who are just natural swimmers, and they're going to figure it out. But you're going to have a lot of turnover, along the way, right? If you just throw people into the deep end, and good luck with you,
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, I'm there. I'm right there with you.
Well, Derek, man, this has been really fun talking. And as we wrap up, I would love to at least point a lot of my audience towards your courses. I think guys like you need to get a lot more street cred, a lot more recognition. You're obviously already known. 15,000 people have already kind of played into it, man. So, you aren't like a stranger to a lot of people out here, but I think more and more people need to know that there's people outside that are also training as well, because that's a very rare blend. You normally get the trainers, or you normally get the guys that are just outside and you can't find them.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate that, Joe. That's great. And my website is www.modernSalesTraining.com. And so it should be pretty easy to find. And I got a courses section on there, and I'm a big fan of also the demo and the trial. And so I've got free courses that you can take without any obligation whatsoever. Nothing gets transferred into a purchase, but I welcome anyone to take those courses. And I even welcome, if people are out there selling right now today, I'd love to get them on the Deal Breakdown podcast. I want salespeople to share deals, because I believe that that's something that we can all learn from and all get better from. And it's all you can also get to my Deal Breakdown from my website and just choose the time to schedule. And as long as you're in B2B sales, because that's what all the episodes are all about. So if you're a business consumer, it's not really about that. It's about selling to actual companies. I want you on. I don't care how long you've been in sales. You got your first deal. Let's talk about it. You got your largest deal ever. Great. You got a good deal that you learned from. Let's talk about it. And I'd love to get you on that show too, Joe.
Hey, man, I'm 100% down to do it, my man. I got some interesting stories. Some are really ugly. Some are kind of pretty, but I don't mind sharing whatever.
That's great. It's great. Yeah. I can't wait.
Awesome. Well, Derek, man, this has been great having you on, man. And boom, we are out of here, brother.